southern end of our city. Of course, we want to provide that world-class quality of life that people are used to in Mississauga, whether it's parks and trails, community centers, rinks, and pools. When I look at our city and the growth that's going on, we start at the south and we've got Lakeview that used to be a power plant. There are 250 acres there. 167 acres were put out to tender. The provincial government has given us 67 acres as a city to build out on. We also have the West Village, 72 acres, so much growth and development. Of course, we have to ensure that we have the water mains, the pipes, the sewers exist underground, that we have the transportation networks to accommodate the growth and the population that will be there. Yes, we're building the LRT north-south on Huron, Ontario, but what we're seeing is a transformation along Huron, Ontario, and we're concerned that what is affordable housing now is being bought up by developers and being transformed into condominiums. So how do we ensure that we keep that market of rent geared to income and affordable housing for those families that need larger units, but they're affordable to live here as well. And then we look at our downtown. So much growth in the downtown. We have no height restrictions here, so once again we're building density, intensification. I have counted that there are over 22 towers that will be breaking ground in the next 5 to 10 years. So you're all familiar with the M-City project. That's 15 acres, 10 towers. They donated 2 back for parkland. Magnificent. And that land the Rogers family has sat upon now for the past 40 years. And why are they building now? Because of the light rail project, because of the LRT. So once you put that transportation network in place, development comes in. And then there are another 10 towers in addition to those 10, actually 12 more, for a total of about 22 towers just in the downtown area. So a city like Mississauga, yes, we're a mature city, but at the same time, we're a young city. So we're still building out our underground infrastructure, we're building out transportation networks, we're building what we call the complete city, but we still have to make those rehabilitation projects to maintain what exists. So here, Ontario LRT is our project. BRT, we're finishing our bus rapid transit system. Our all-day two-way GO train network system continues to be our key ask and our key priority, that we have removed the freight train traffic other than the southern CP line and open it up for commuter traffic. We want to build out our downtown transit hub. As I said, there's so much population coming into the downtown, the Lakeview lands, the West Village, M-City. To build out the Dundas corridor so it connects with the Kipling station along a bus rapid transit network. To look at the Lakeshore corridor for transit. We are a smart city. We want to become an even smarter city with innovation and technology. We have a climate action plan. Mississauga has recently joined the Compact of Mayors, and I'm really excited about that. We also have a stormwater levy, so we're leading. We're putting money aside each year, 37 million, in fact, 40 million, in fact, $40 million each year to address our underground system, or to provide for stormwater ponds, the erosion of creek banks, etc. And I talked about our downtown Master 21 plan and our paths, cycling paths. We have so much going on from a perspective here in Mississauga. We're so excited, and we're so grateful to you and to your government for your investments to make our cities and our residents enjoy that same quality of life. So thank you.
Can I ask you a little bit about the change that has happened in these two cities? If I look back at the 50s, 60s, 70s, they were cities that developed primarily around suburban homes, large homes where everybody wanted property, a front yard, a backyard, which meant it had to be spread out over a large area, which meant a lot of infrastructure and difficult to service public transit.
Right.
That won't change, but what you're both talking about is a lot of more intensification happening, such as the buildings we see around here. Is that the change?
Certainly. So I think we're just ahead of Brampton on the curve. You're about where we were about just 2 decades ago, building out greenfields. So Mississauga was farmland and fruit trees 44 years ago. There were actually cows and horses grazing where we're sitting today 44, 45 years ago before we built out. Yes, we were known as a sleepy suburb, perhaps where the executives of downtown Toronto lived. The boulevards were wide, gas was cheap, land was cheap. We built out beautiful suburbs for our residents to enjoy. But today we know that's not the most efficient form of building. So we're retroactively going back and intensifying. We don't have greenfield anymore. We're building up instead of out. And yes, we're building in that transportation, that transit network that we so need for our residents, to give them alternatives to get out of their cars. And so those are the major changes. We're embracing that intensification. We've adopted the goals, the targets set out by the provincial government in their growth management strategy for us, 80 persons or jobs per hectare, which is much higher in the transit and intensification sectors. So, you know, we have embraced that. We've embraced public transit networks, and we're hoping to only further put more money. In fact, we put 100% of our gas tax dollars right into our transportation networks right off the bat. So we're leaders in that as well. So I think that is the change. We're all growing up. You know, Mississauga, we're known as an edge city. I want us to be that leading edge city, and I want us to be regarded as a city on our own right, so that going downtown doesn't mean going downtown Toronto to a hockey game, but going downtown is downtown Mississauga to enjoy the restaurants and the culture, the arts that exist here, or going to a Steelheads game or Raptors 905. So those are the changes. I think we're struggling from that transition from being known as the sleepy suburb, a great place for families to grow up, to a city in our own right, a leading edge city.
So Brampton's in a little bit of a different state. We have, so I have one of the youngest populations, I think, in Canada. The average age is about 34, very diverse. So that young, diverse, growing community is an asset for sure. But I inherited a city that essentially is, many of my residents call a sleeping city, where you go home to sleep every night. And at the end of the day, one of the reasons I left, because I was a municipal councillor for 12 years, I went to the province, was because we didn't have a partnership with the province of Ontario at the time, because we weren't working necessarily with the federal government. We didn't have the health care we needed. We didn't have the transportation we needed. We didn't have the 410 highway built out through our city. We were building a lot of houses, and that seemed to be our specialty, and that's all we did. So a lot of sprawl. We were not intensifying where transit was. We didn't have the transit to support a city. At that time, we didn't have the health care we needed at that time. We had one old hospital that had been built in 1925. It had had a fire and a flood, and we had to evacuate everyone in our hospital because a transformer blew up. So that's the kind of system that I left in 2003. I went to the province to advocate for those kind of infrastructure investments. So since then, fast forward, we've had about $2 billion in healthcare announcements in Brampton, but it's still not enough. When you're a high growth community, a lot of your census data derives what you do, and we're always catching up. And for us, we've been using 2011 data. That's light years behind where we are as a city. So it's a challenge to change the way you do business, and certainly we as a city are starting to talk about that commercial industrial ratio being far more important than the residential ratio, deriving what we do and not converting commercial industrial lands into residential. That's what we did as a city. We had the development community coming in asking us to convert lands, and at the time council thought that was a good idea. We now know that that commercial industrial, the more you have of that kind of development in your community, the lower your property taxes. So this is about finding the right kind of balance. As leadership, it's a challenge for us to explain to our residents why their property taxes keep going up and why they have to leave their city to work. We want them to be working closer to home. Our university and Ryerson's agreement to come and be our partner, working with Sheridan College, is really going to transform our city. It's already changed the kinds of conversations I'm having with international investors, whether they're from China or India. They're coming, they want to invest. They're looking at both of our cities because of the diversity and the makeup of it, looking at seeing how our proximity to the airport really helps, and our proximity to a great workforce. So for example, just recently, Mayor Crombie and myself and Mayor Tory and other cities and regions got together to put together a bid for Amazon. We can do that because we have a talent pool, we have the infrastructure here that makes us a very attractive. And you know what, I like our chances. If it's not with Amazon, it's other companies that are looking at our cities and our infrastructure as being a selling feature and making us a stronger and more competitive region to do business in.
I just want to address the same thing, and let me just pay tribute to former Mayor McCallion. This woman had it right when she started attracting business here to Mississauga through foreign direct investment. It is as a result, she specialized in 4 sectors, went after business all around the world, and as a result, our tax base is 60 to 65% business driven and only 30-35% residential. And that's thanks to Mayor McCallion, that we have, former Mayor McCallion, 88,000 businesses, 73 Fortune 500 companies, 1,400 multinationals based here, and has made us a very strong economy. We have a $40 billion GDP here, and as Mayor Jeffrey said, we're able to attract companies in our cities because we have a highly trained, highly educated, highly skilled, multilinguistic workforce. 2/3 of our population here in Mississauga has post-secondary degree. Largely that is because some of our newcomers come here because they're highly trained, highly educated, right? As well as our domestic population, highly trained, highly skilled. That is our core competence. Our people, our diversity, the languages spoken, and the businesses that we're able to attract. I have continued to do what former Mayor McCallion has done, attracting those businesses, going abroad, making our value proposition pitch abroad and bringing those companies here, able to land BioLab and able to land Tomei from Japan as well. So it works, and I tell you, this woman had it right by attracting business and not allowing that conversion. So we're very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor McCallion. Minister, can I move us along and talk about climate change? Mayor Jeffrey talked about flood mitigation. Mayor Jeffrey talked about flood mitigation. It's one of the issues that has been of interest to a number of cities. Calgary in your province, of course, being one of the key ones. Tell us about the overall issues around climate change that you're prioritizing.
So, I was I visited a number of cities and get the chance to see what the impact is, the impact of climate change that is having, on the infrastructure, but overall the quality of life for people and the challenges that we have to figure out the best way to deal with climate change. So what we are doing, first of all, I need to acknowledge that some of the more innovative and creative approaches to climate change are happening at local level, at municipal levels. Municipalities are actually leading in that field. So how do we support them to undertake those initiatives and help achieve the national outcomes related to Pan-Canadian framework on climate change? So we will be investing close to $25 billion over the next 10 years under green infrastructure. There are 3 areas of focus under that. One of them is to make sure that every Canadian has a right to clean, safe drinking water. Regardless where you live, that's a fundamental. It's so disheartening to see that in a country where vast majority of Canadians take safe drinking water for granted because they have it. Right? There are communities out there, particularly communities whose land that we sit on, our Indigenous people, Métis people and Inuit people, who are denied that basic right to have safe drinking water. And that needs to change. And we need to work hard to, and all of us have a responsibility to make sure that changes. So that's one area of focus under the green infrastructure. The second area is overall, how do we adapt our existing infrastructure to climate change? When you visit northern community, you are seeing the degradation of the permafrost and how the underground pipes are actually cracking because of that. Right? How do we make sure that we adapt to that? How do we support municipalities to either replace those pipes or find a different way of dealing with? The third is overall our goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. How do we invest into new technologies? How do we invest into renewable sources of energy, and how do we support municipalities to do that. So that's where the three focus that we have under the green infrastructure funding that we'll be negotiating with provinces to provide the necessary support. Another thing I want to touch on, I think it does tie into green infrastructure, it does tie into climate change, but it also ties into the use of data and technology, and how do we use data and technology to improve services, to make people's life better. Sometimes we feel that data and technology is so disconnected from people. I'll give you an example. In the US, they launched this challenge called Smart Cities Challenge, and we have launched our own challenge. I'll talk about that a little bit later. What the US did is that they supported some of their local communities through that Smart City Challenge, and one of the projects they supported was use of technology and autonomous vehicles and public transportation to help pregnant women, right? Particularly in those neighborhoods where infant mortality rate was the highest. So with that use of technology and having that data, they were able to reduce infant mortality rate by 4 times in that particular neighborhood. Just imagine technology data saving lives. We don't see it that way. But we need to start thinking about it that way. We need to start thinking how we actually make technology real for people. How do we make it so meaningful to people that they see a connection to it? It is not just Googling something, it is not just finding an app to find the best restaurant, which is fine, right? But it's how we use that platform to link people to services in a more efficient and effective way. We see a lot of opportunities in that. So we're launching this Smart Cities Challenge. I want you to please think about that. We will be investing close to $300 million in that. And you will get more information in a couple of months. There will be 5 awards given. The largest amount will be given to major urban centers, $50 million. Then second award is for mid-sized cities, $10 million each. Then $5 million for rural communities, and $5 million for indigenous communities. We're not defining what smart city should look like. We want you to imagine what smart city should look like in your mind. And we want you to work with your non-profit sector, we want you to work with post-secondary institutions, and get the private sector involved, and really think broadly about how you can solve problems by using technology and having better data. So that's where we are. I think that through that, we will be able to find solutions to homelessness. We'll probably be able to find solutions to climate change, right? Better ways of dealing with climate change. There's so much potential in that.
Thank you. Jeffrey, your thoughts on infrastructure and climate change?
Well, I think all municipalities are always looking as to how they can save money. So saving money is probably the single best way to get municipalities to think about greening their infrastructure, whether it's changing their lighting, which can save you $1 million, changing the fuel you use in your buses, which can save you money, as well as protect the air quality in all of our municipalities. I think that for us, and for my city, I think public transit is one of the best ways, not only to protect the air, to make life more affordable. We are all struggling with gridlock. Wherever you are in the city, it's taking longer to get back and forth. It's affecting your ability to enjoy time with your family and your quality of life. And in our case, certainly an LRT helps. More innovative conversations with regards to GO Transit to connect us along the super innovation corridor between Kitchener, Waterloo, and Toronto. And Brampton being in the middle of that super innovation corridor is part of how I think that will help in those conversations. But we're all thinking differently, and we actually have a provincial partner that's helping us, urging us to put in asset management plans, which I think really help all of us determine where our structures are in the order of when you should fix them. It's easy as municipal politicians, we do some of the heavy lifting at the beginning of our terms, not so much at the end. As you get closer and closer to the election, municipalities get less, or municipal councillors get less and less brave about the difficult things they have to do. So one of the things Bonnie talked about earlier was about the 2% being put away for infrastructure. We did that, and it was a struggle to do that, and even now it's still a struggle. Every time you do those, what are responsible activities as municipal councillors, sometimes you get pushback from the business community to say, well, why are you doing that? To me, that makes sense, because then those infrastructure dollars you put away, it actually positions you so that when the federal government comes to you with a program that you can participate in, you actually get a greater return on your investment, because you're able to invest in those green infrastructure projects or those transportation projects more easily, because you actually have the assets to do it and you have the momentum locally. So those are the kinds of projects that I think make the bigger difference, and we've already seen the success, so success breeds success.
So just to quantify it, we want to say thank you. As a region, we received $10 million that went towards funding and rehabilitation, modernizing our drinking water, wastewater, stormwater infrastructure, and also planning for the design of future facilities and upgrades to the existing systems. Our projects in Mississauga focused on our flood control, or erosion, creek bank erosion, and our stormwater management. I mentioned earlier that we have embraced a climate change strategy, and we've recently joined the Compact of Mayors Abroad, so we've joined the Paris and the Londons and the Tokyos, and we're really quite honored. So we have plans that address mitigation and adaptation to climate change, but we're also early adopters. We're one of a few leading cities that imposed a stormwater levy. And what this levy does is allows us, it's dedicated, sustainable funding that is put into it as a dedicated fund to allow us to address the needs of stormwater. So we collect $40 million each year because we assess the asphalt on homes and on businesses. So the average home in Mississauga pays approximately $100 each year, which is their stormwater levy, which we put in a dedicated fund. And businesses, based on the asphalt that they have, they pay per square footage. So this all adds up to $40 million, which helps us deal with our creek banks, our building new stormwater ponds, the sewers and the pipes underground, and plus we have all kinds of other initiatives, as Mayor Jeffrey has discussed, low impact developments, tree plantings, whatever you can to make us a greener, hybrid buses, a greener city. But Minister, you also talked about smart cities, and you and I were in India, was that January? And we talked at Vibrant Gujarat, and you invited me because you know that, you invited me to participate on some of your panels because you know that Mississauga is well on its way also to becoming a smart city. And wherever we traveled in India, Prime Minister Modi had challenged cities across India to become smart cities. And so we too have embraced the smart city, and we are working closely with Cisco to further become even a smarter city, I've called it earlier. We have Wi-Fi in all of our buildings. We believe in open data. Last weekend, 2 weekends ago, we had a hackathon here where we encouraged all the coders to come into, last year was Sheridan, this year was at UTM, and create new apps for our citizens, for our residents to use. We have smart grids, LED lights and hybrid buses, and ATMS, Advanced Management Traffic Systems. We have what looks like the power center of Cape Canaveral, Nassau Launch. We have a room full of monitors that monitors each of our intersections and provides a better flow of traffic to keep our traffic moving so that it doesn't slow down our economy, let's put it that way. So we're embracing smart city, we're embracing climate change, and we have strategies to deal with both.
Okay, thank you. We're going to explore one more issue, and then there'll be a bit of time for questions and answers. So the last issue I'd like to talk about is social infrastructure and affordable housing. I'll start with you, Minister.
Yeah, you know, some people criticize the federal government that we are not building the right type of infrastructure, that we should focus on more trade-oriented infrastructure, and we are doing that. But in our mind, equally important is our investment into affordable housing, into early learning and childcare facilities, into recreational, cultural infrastructure. Because when we talk about economic growth, when we talk about creating opportunities for all Canadians to have a decent job, and we don't worry about, don't have that anxiety about their future and the future of their children. And housing plays a major role in that. If people don't have a decent, safe place to live, they cannot fully participate in the economy. They cannot fully participate in the community. And I share this story wherever I go, and this story really illustrates the struggles and hopes and aspirations of many Canadians. And this is a story of a young mother of 3 children that I came to know when I was serving on City Council. And this mother had multiple issues. I mean, she had addiction issues, she had mental health issues, and she was, not getting along with her family, and she was living at a shelter at that time. And she was just about to be kicked out of the shelter too. Right? So she was desperate for help. So we luckily, because of the social agencies in Edmonton, we were able to link her to an agency that was able to provide her a stable place. Along with that, they were able to provide her with wraparound services related to mental health and addiction. So I ran into that mother, but a year later, after she was able to find this place, within that 1 year, she was turning her life around. She was holding a job, her children were back in school, and she was getting better. Her mental health was getting better. So just imagine for a minute, if that mother of 3 children didn't have that place, didn't have that support system to help her. The loss for her and the loss for society. The loss for her 3 children. Not just her future potential, but how much that would have cost you as a taxpayer if those 3 children ended up on the street being homeless. It makes economic sense for us to invest in social infrastructure, because this is about building individuals' capacity to participate in the economy, but also making your community better and building a better economy and building a workforce and women's participation in the workforce. So it really ties into that economic story that we are trying to, that I was trying to tell earlier. But you do it in multiple ways, not just by improving the productivity of your transportation network, but you do that by unlocking people's potential to participate in the economy. It's so fundamental. From our point of view, social infrastructure is so fundamental, and that's why we have committed to investing close to $25 billion over the next decade, building affordable housing, shelters, dealing with homelessness issues, and early learning and childcare facilities.
So I'm struck by some of your answers. I'm going to ask you to take us behind